Karkame. And we're back again looking at our study guide for our final for our Algebra 1 Semester 2. We're going to look at questions 41 through 49. Let's go. All right, so on our first question here, we're looking at what the discriminant of the equation is. So if you remember, the discriminant is the part of the quadratic formula that's in the radicand, so b squared minus 4ac. So we just pull that from our formula up here, and when we solve, we get positive 1. So negative 3 squared minus 4 times 2 times 1 is positive 1. So that is the answer to 41. Down here on 42, there's a couple different ways to solve this. So this has a linear function or linear equation on one side and a quadratic equation on the other side. So you can leave them the way they are and then combine like terms, moving those x's to one side of the equation, getting x squared minus x. This is now in standard form because our c is just 0. And then you can use the quadratic formula, like over here, to solve and get your x values. Or you can subtract, so set up the two formulas, quadratic and linear, and then subtract them. So I subtract my y's, I subtract my negative x, which is adding x, and I get the same formula here as I do up here. Then I can come over and use that quadratic formula to solve, and I end up getting positive 1 and 0. So by looking at my graphs, I'm looking for kind of my solutions here, but you can see that the only positive 1 and 0 that makes the most sense would be D, because another way to solve this is to actually look at the graphs. So I know that my linear equation is y equals negative x. So that means that slope has to be negative. The only other one that has 0 and positive 1 has a positive linear equation, so it can't be C. If you didn't have these visuals, you would then have to take the 0 and the 1 and plug it back into this equation, these equations right here. So plug 0 into this equation and 1 into this equation, and then you should be getting 0, 0. And 1, negative 1, which is actually the solutions to this chart. Remember, because it is a system, we should have the actual points and not just the x values. But in the end, D is our answer. On 43, we are multiplying radical expressions here and then simplifying them. So we're going to take the numbers that are outside the house and multiply those. Take all the numbers inside the house and multiply those. X to the 5th can be split into x to the 3rd times x to the 2nd. Now I have 2 x to the 3rds, and I had 2 12s, so both of these that are highlighted will be kicked outside the house. And then x squared can be split into x times x, so that's also going to get kicked outside the house. And we know that because none of our answer choices have radicands, so we know that it should be a perfect square inside. So we're going to do 3 times 4, which we're already out, times 12, that came from inside our radicand, that's 144. And then x cubed, which is this part, times x, which is this part, and that makes x to the 4th, so B is our answer. For number 44, there's a lot of different ways to solve this one. You could keep it like it is like here and then complete the square, or you can move that 1 to the other side to make a C value and then solve using the quadratic formula, which is what I did here. Once I got to this part, the square root of 36 plus 4 is the square root of 40. Now, because I'm going to be dividing by 2, I went ahead and split and simplified this radical. Looking and hoping for a factor of 2 to be kicked out of the house so that I could divide it by 2. So I did find that 40 is the same as 2 times the square root of 10. So negative 6 divided by 2 is negative 3. 2 times the square root of 10 divided by 2 is just the square root of 10. So that's why we end up getting negative 3 plus or minus the square root of 10, which is A. Oopsie. Down here, We have the solutions to the systems of equations. So similar to the one from before, we could subtract or rearrange and get all the like terms on one side and then solve that quadratic equation to find our zeros, plugging them back in for x to solve for y. So that's what I did here. I subtracted the 4x from both sides and I got x squared minus 1. I then moved all my variables to one side so that x squared was by itself, and that's how I got the x value of positive and negative 1/2. Now, I could stop here because I have multiple choice. I know that the only answer choices that have x as positive and negative 1/2 is A and C. However, I could have graphed it, and you can tell from my graph that it's a little rough. If you have a really good ruler and you're really nice and clean and easy, it makes a lot more sense. So I prefer doing it this way. Excuse me. But the way that you would have graphed these equations is the line is easy because it's in slope-intercept form. Your intercept is 0, and then your slope is 4. And then you would start to find the x value for the intercept for your parabola, and that was negative 1/2. Plug that into the equation, you would have gotten negative 2 for the y value, and then, graphed from there, different points. So like I said, I prefer this way as actually solving it, but you could also graph it. All right, then that leads us here to 46. So do not be afraid of the fact that there is a weird fraction in here. We can just get rid of it. So let's move the 2 to the other side, and then we multiplied both sides by the denominator of 2x squared minus 1. It cancels the fraction side over here, leaving the numerator of 1. And on the right-hand side, I'm now going to distribute the negative 2 to the 2x squared and the negative 1. That's going to give me 1 equals negative 4x squared plus 2. So again, I went ahead and isolated the x squared so that I could solve using square roots. And I got a solution of x value of positive and negative 1/2, which is C. 49, we also don't like too much. Remember, we're using Pythagorean theorem here. A squared plus b squared equals c squared. It doesn't matter which leg is A or B, but it does matter where your hypotenuse is, and it's always the longest side. It's the farthest from the right angle. That is C. So I went ahead and did a squared here, so x squared plus x plus 10 squared. I factored this out and multiplied it to get x, right? X times x is x squared. X times 10 is 10x times 2 is 20x. 10 times 10 is 100. Then I did the square root of 50. Okay, and that is where we're going to continue on from here, and we're basically just going to solve until we can get a quadratic formula that we can solve easily. So I went ahead and combined our terms and multiplied out all my exponents. So I got 2x squared plus 20x plus 100 equals 2,500. I then decided to do completing the square. I just felt like it was easier. If you wanted to, you could have subtracted the 2,500 and then used the quadratic formula, but I just felt like it was lending itself really easily to that. So I subtracted 100 from both sides, saw that I had to get my a value to 1, so saw they were all even numbers, divided them all by 2. And then I went ahead and did completing the square. So I did 10 divided by 2 squared, which is 25. Added 25 to both sides. Took my perfect squared trinomial and turned it into a binomial squared. Then did the square root of that, and I got x plus 5 equals positive or negative 35. Moving over here, I split that into two problems. So x plus 5 equals 35 and x plus 5 equals negative 35. When I solve those, I get a positive 30 as one option and a negative 40 as another option. Now, negative 40 doesn't make sense in this problem because it is distance. We're talking about an actual triangle I would measure the length of, so that doesn't make any sense. So it would have to be positive 30 as my solution. And then the last two problems we're going to look at, we've got the zeros of a quadratic function, which we can solve a couple different ways. So one way that we can do it is actually take the zeros and plug them into each of these problems since they are multiplication problems. or sorry, not multiplication, multiple choice problems, and see which ones make sense. Remember, the zeros of a quadratic equation mean that it's a x of 7 and a y of 0, an x of -3 and a y of 0. So we want to make sure that y is 0. If x is 7, then the f of x should be 0. So if I plug these into the equation, I get like 7 squared plus 4 times 7 minus 21. That one does not turn into 0. 49 plus 28 plus minus 21 is not 0, so that one can't be the answer. 7 squared minus 4 times 7 minus 21, that one does work because you get 49 minus 28 minus 21. That makes 0. Over here, 2 times 7 squared minus 8 times 7 minus 21. That one gives me 98, take away 56, take away 21, that is not 0. But 5 times 7 squared minus 4 times 7 minus 21, because the inside of this is 0, that also makes 0. So the answers here are B and D, and that is just one way to do them. Another way to solve this would be to actually solve each equation themselves using quadratic formula or one of those methods, factoring, things like that, and seeing if you get 7 and -3 as your solutions, your zeros. That one takes a little longer. I think taking your zeros and plugging them into each equation is a little bit faster. That's my suggestion. And then the last one that we're going to go ahead and go over is this one where it says the quadratic function d equals -2x squared plus 15 models a skateboarder's distance in feet from the bottom of a hill x seconds after the skateboarder starts moving down the hill. How many seconds is the skateboarder 8 feet from the bottom of the hill? So we've had this one on a test before. D is 8. It's representing distance. It explains it in the formula or in the equation. And then we're going to go ahead and solve. So what I'm probably going to do is, again, solve this by doing square roots. So I'm going to subtract and get -7 equals -2x squared. Those cancel out. Divide by -2 and get x squared equals 7/2. And so this is where I'm going to do the square root of that. And I'm going to get positive and negative square root of 7/2. And if I do this on a calculator, you're going to get B, 1.9 seconds. You're going to get that a negative answer as well. But again, because this is distance and time, we're not dealing with negative seconds, so it has to be B. All right, bring any questions you have to class, and then we will do the last page of our study guide next time. Good luck.